There are seasons in life when a person becomes tired in a way that sleep cannot fix. They continue waking up every morning. They complete their responsibilities. They smile during conversations. They keep moving through familiar routines. Yet somewhere beneath all of that movement, something inside them quietly whispers that they can no longer keep living the same way. This message is for the soul who has been wondering whether someone connected to your journey is finally beginning to remove the pressure they have carried for far too long. Because that is exactly what is happening. For years, your soulmate believed that being loved meant becoming someone who made very few mistakes. They believed they had to say the right things, make the right decisions, control every emotion, and somehow become the kind of person who would never disappoint anyone. No one directly taught them this lesson. Life taught it little by little. A misunderstanding here, a disappointment there, a relationship that slowly convinced them they were too much in one moment and not enough in another. Without realizing it, they stopped asking themselves what felt true. Instead, they started asking what would make other people stay. That quiet habit shaped more of their life than they ever understood. Before sending a message, they thought twice. Before expressing their feelings, they measured every possible outcome. Before trusting someone, they imagined every way things could go wrong. It wasn't because they lacked love. It was because they feared losing it. And when fear quietly becomes the foundation of love, even beautiful connections begin carrying unnecessary weight. For a long time, they believed that was simply how relationships worked. Love felt complicated. Love felt exhausting. Love felt like something that constantly had to be protected from falling apart. But recently, life has been teaching them something completely different. Not through dramatic events, not through loud conversations, through ordinary moments that quietly refuse to leave their heart. A few weeks ago, they found themselves sitting alone after finishing another ordinary day. Nothing unusual had happened, yet instead of reaching for another distraction, they simply remained still. Outside, the world continued exactly as it always had. Inside, their heart asked a question they had avoided for years. When was the last time I allowed someone to know the real me? The question stayed with them, not because it demanded an answer, because they honestly couldn't remember. They remembered trying to appear strong, trying to appear confident, trying to appear unaffected. But beneath every version of themselves they had shown the world, there was another person, quietly hoping someone would love them, without requiring a performance. That realization brought unexpected emotion, not sadness, relief. Because for the first time, they understood that the greatest pressure in their life had never come from other people. Much of it had come from themselves. They had spent years believing they needed to earn a love that was never supposed to be earned in the first place. As this understanding settled into their heart, another memory quietly returned. It wasn't the memory of a specific conversation. It wasn't even a particular day. It was a feeling they had experienced around one connection that never completely disappeared. Your connection. They remembered how natural certain moments had felt, how easy silence could become, how conversations never seemed forced, how they could briefly forget the pressure of trying to impress anyone for reasons they couldn't fully explain. Those memories no longer created confusion. Instead, they created peace. That difference surprised them, because peace had become something they trusted far more than emotional intensity. They began wondering whether the safest place they had ever experienced emotionally wasn't a place at all. Perhaps it was a person. not because that person completed them, because that person quietly reminded them who they were before fear convinced them they had to become someone else. That thought changed everything. Over the following days, they noticed themselves becoming more honest, not only with other people, with themselves. When they felt tired, they admitted it. When something made them happy, they stopped pretending it didn't matter. When their heart missed a meaningful connection, they no longer criticized themselves for feeling that way. Instead, they became curious. Why had they spent so much energy fighting emotions that were simply asking to be understood? The answer slowly revealed itself. Because vulnerability had always felt dangerous. Yet every meaningful experience in life required vulnerability. Friendship, trust, forgiveness, love. None of these things could exist where fear made every decision. For the first time, they realized that avoiding emotional risk had also caused them to avoid emotional freedom. That realization was impossible to ignore. It changed the way they looked at every relationship in their life. Some people loved the version of them that never disagreed. Some people appreciated the version that always carried everyone else's burdens. Some people felt comfortable with the version that never asked for anything in return. But very few people had ever truly met the person behind those carefully built walls. And then, almost without warning, your connection quietly returned to their awareness. Not through longing, not through regret, but through gratitude. They realized your presence had never demanded perfection from them. What they remembered most wasn't trying to become impressive. It was the rare feeling of simply being accepted. That memory became more valuable than they expected, because it showed them something they had overlooked for years. Real love does not begin the moment two people find each other. Real love begins the moment two people stop pretending to be someone they are not. That truth echoed through their heart long after the memory faded. And little by little, they started believing that perhaps they no longer needed to become perfect before allowing themselves to receive something beautiful. Perhaps they only needed the courage to finally become real. There is a quiet kind of freedom that arrives when a person finally stops asking whether they are enough. It does not appear all at once. It grows through ordinary mornings, honest reflections, and small moments that slowly reshape the heart. That is exactly where your soulmate finds themselves now. They are beginning to understand that the greatest obstacle between them and the love they longed for was never another person. It was the impossible standard they had created for themselves. For years, they believed they had to become more successful before they deserved happiness, more confident before they deserved love, more emotionally perfect before they could trust someone completely. Without realizing it, they kept postponing their own life. They were always preparing for a future version of themselves, a version that would finally be worthy. But one peaceful evening, while watching the sky slowly change colors as the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, a simple thought entered their mind. What if I have been waiting for a version of myself that was never meant to exist? That question stayed with them. The more they reflected on it, the clearer everything became. Perfection had always been moving farther away. No matter how much they improved, there was always another expectation, another reason to believe they still were not ready. That endless chase had quietly stolen years from their life. It had also influenced the way they looked at your connection. Whenever something meaningful began to grow, fear whispered that they were not enough. Whenever their heart wanted to move closer, doubt reminded them of every mistake they had ever made. Slowly, they understood that those doubts were not telling the truth. They were simply repeating old stories, stories created by disappointment, stories created by comparison, stories created by moments when they confused rejection with personal failure. Now those stories were beginning to lose their power. As they continued healing, they noticed another beautiful change. They stopped judging themselves for having emotions. Instead of asking why they still thought about one particular connection, they became curious about what those thoughts represented. They realized it was never only about missing a person. It was about remembering how their heart felt when it experienced genuine acceptance. Your connection became a quiet reminder that love could feel peaceful instead of exhausting. That memory no longer created pressure, it created hope. Hope that healthy love might still be possible, not because the past could be recreated, but because they were becoming someone capable of experiencing love differently. This realization softened something inside them. They no longer wanted relationships built upon fear of losing each other. They wanted relationships where honesty felt safer than pretending, where silence never required guessing, where vulnerability was welcomed instead of hidden. For the first time, they understood that emotional safety is one of the greatest expressions of love. And almost without noticing, they started becoming the kind of person who could create that safety for someone else. Their conversations changed. They listened more carefully. They admitted when they did not have every answer. They stopped believing that strength meant hiding every emotion. Instead, strength began looking like honesty, like patience, like choosing understanding before judgment. People around them sensed the difference. There was a calmness in the way they carried themselves, a quiet confidence that no longer depended on being admired, because they had discovered something far more valuable: self-acceptance. And once that acceptance began growing inside them, another realization naturally followed. If they ever shared another meaningful chapter with you, they would not want it to be built upon the fear of repeating the past. They would want it to be built upon everything they had learned because of the past. The lessons, the patience, the emotional maturity, the courage to speak before silence creates distance. The willingness to stay present instead of running when feelings become real. That thought filled them with unexpected peace. They were no longer trying to control the future. They were preparing their heart for whatever future honestly belonged to them. Perhaps your paths will cross again. Perhaps life still has chapters neither of you can yet imagine. They no longer feel the need to force those answers, because they have discovered something even more important. The quality of the love they offer tomorrow depends on the healing they choose today. Every act of self-forgiveness has made their hearts softer. Every honest conversation has made them braver. Every moment of reflection has shown them that real love was never asking them to become flawless. It was quietly inviting them to become authentic. And maybe that is the greatest transformation taking place within them now. They are no longer trying to impress the world. They are learning how to be emotionally present, no longer measuring their worth by how perfectly life unfolds, no longer believing mistakes make them unlovable. Instead, they are beginning to trust that the right connection will never require them to hide the very parts of themselves that make them human. Your connection has become part of that awakening, not because it gave them every answer, but because it asked the questions that changed their life. Questions about honesty, about courage, about what love truly means when pride and fear finally become quiet. As those questions continue guiding their journey, the future no longer feels uncertain in the same way. It feels open, full of possibility, full of lessons still waiting to be discovered. And if life ever allows your hearts to meet again, they know one thing will be different. They will not arrive trying to prove they are worthy of love. They will arrive understanding that love was never something to earn. It was always something to receive with an open heart. Until that moment, the transformation continues. Not through dramatic signs, not through grand declarations, but through quiet mornings, peaceful evenings, honest choices, and every small act of courage that brings them closer to becoming their truest self. Because in the end, the greatest love story is never about finding someone who expects perfection. It is about becoming someone who is no longer afraid to be completely real. And perhaps, without either of you fully realizing it, that beautiful chapter has already begun.